If there's one rule to this game, everybody can name it. Be cool.
Oh yeah, I say pressure drop, oh pressure, oh yeah, pressure's gonna drop on you. I say pressure drop, oh pressure, oh yeah, pressure's gonna drop on you.
Ah, deep down inside, they know I'm cool. I said now, the moment of truth has finally come.
In 1921, a speedy contraption skidded across the snow-covered fields of Minnesota's Red River Valley. An airplane propeller, car engine, and other parts were cobbled together into one of the first snowmobiles ever built. The man behind the snow sled was Frederick McKinley Jones, an African-American tinkerer turned engineer, whose work would change his hometown of Halleck, Minnesota, and later change the world.
He sought knowledge and sought understanding. So I mean, not only did his interest in the world and technology lead to a great career for him, but it also led him down all these different paths.
When he was a boy, Fred liked to tinker with his father's pocket watch. Eventually orphaned, Fred turned his tinkering toward early automobiles. Working odd jobs throughout the Midwest, Fred ended up on a large farm in northwestern Minnesota run by Walter Hill, son of empire builder James J. Hill. Here, Fred found work as an engineer, and he found a home in Halleck. The year was 1912. This phenomenal fix-it man kept Halleck up and running in these early days of gas engines and electricity. After fighting in World War I, Fred Jones returned to Halleck and to his lifelong passion for automobiles. At the tracks around the region, Fred would run into a lot of bigoted drivers and race organizers, but all things were equal when the flag was dropped, and Fred dominated the area's races. Off the track, Fred's tinkering went beyond cars. His fix-it work was often to help a fellow Halleck resident, to meet the need of a neighbor. A local doctor complained to Fred about having to constantly haul aching patients from their rooms to the hospital x-ray station. Fred devised a portable x-ray machine. Radio had become a huge part of American life by the 1920s. Fred and a partner created microphones and transmitters. With the advent of talkies, sound was also becoming part of the movies, but the owner of Halleck's Little Gym Theater couldn't afford a new sound system, so he went to Fred for a favor. Halleck's handyman devised a film sound system that was so innovative, it caught the eye of a Minneapolis entrepreneur named Joe Numero. Numero later admitted when a black man entered his office, he thought it was a joke.
I'm sure he was surrounded by others who may have at times doubted his ability. However, I'm sure that there were people who got it and then were able to support him.
Numero and Jones started working together. As he did for his neighbors in Halleck, Fred's work was often responding to calls for help and tackling problems that needed solving. In 1938, when his boss asked him to figure out a way to keep food from spoiling during overland transportation, Fred Jones went to work.
The process producing cold is the process of removing heat. Of the three effects of heat, refrigeration is chiefly concerned with two. The first effect, that of sensible heat, is one that causes a change in temperature as read in degrees on a thermometer. In this example, as heat is applied, the temperature of the water in the kettle rises up to 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. At this point, the temperature remains constant, and the second effect, latent heat, is observed. The water changes state and becomes a vapor. Change of state may proceed in either of two directions. When a sufficient quantity of heat is absorbed by a solid, it passes into the liquid state. Upon absorbing more heat, the liquid evaporates and changes to a gas. When sufficient heat is withdrawn or released from the substance in its gaseous state, the gas condenses or changes back to a liquid. When more heat is withdrawn, the liquid freezes or returns to the solid state. For any substance, there are two distinct quantities of heat involved in changes of state. The first, latent heat of fusion, is the quantity of heat that must be absorbed by the substance in the solid state in order for it to change to a liquid, or that must be removed from the liquid if it is to return to the solid state. The other quantity of heat, latent heat of vaporization, is that which must be absorbed by the substance in the liquid state in order for it to change to a gas, or that must be removed from the gas if it is to return to the liquid state. In mechanical refrigeration, it is the movement between liquid and gaseous states that is important. Absorption or release of latent heat does not alter the temperature of a substance while it is changing state. In this example, although the block of ice absorbs a certain quantity of heat as it melts, its temperature during melting remains constant at 32 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the change of state. Heat quantity is measured in British thermal units, or BTUs. A British thermal unit represents the quantity of heat required to raise the temperature of a pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. We know that when a liquid is heated to a certain temperature, it boils and changes to a gas. However, it is possible to cause the same liquid to boil at a lower temperature. This is done by controlling the pressure upon the liquid. The higher the pressure, the higher the boiling point temperature. The lower the pressure, the lower the boiling point temperature. It is through control of pressure that refrigerator temperatures are controlled. We know that heat will flow from the warmer to the cooler of two adjacent bodies, that the flow will be relatively fast while there is a large difference between the temperatures of the two bodies, and will become slower as this difference becomes smaller until it ceases when the temperatures of the two bodies have become equal. When a liquid changes to a gas, it absorbs heat which flows to it from its warmer surroundings. When these surroundings happen to be food in a refrigerator box, heat is withdrawn from it. That is, it is cooled or refrigerated. This is the rock-bottom basis of modern refrigeration. There are three methods by which transfer of heat from one place or body to another is accomplished.
Ways for heat transfer, there are three. Gotta know all the facts to know chemistry. Radiation, convection, conduction. It's about time we learn from this introduction.
The first ray goes by the name of radiation. What a creation, we gotta know the limitations.
Yep.
Energy transmits through electromagnetic waves, just like UV light, infrared, and gamma rays.
Ways for heat transfer, there are three. Radiation, convection, conduction. It's about time we learn from this introduction.
The second is convection. Word on the street is particles move upward when they're heated. Movement in the gaseous phase is what keeps us cool on those hot sunny days. The last one we know as conduction, the process by which heat transmits through a substance. The transfer and distribution of energy, it's the hot touch of the cup logic.
Refrigeration makes use of all three methods of heat transfer in removing heat from food items to a liquid cooling agent. Heat travels between the food and the cooling unit wall, both by means of radiation through direct waves and by means of convection through air circulation. The heat passes through the cooling unit wall to the liquid by conduction. The substance which soaks up heat during evaporation to create coolness is called a refrigerant. Its function is to remove heat from one place, leaving that place cool, and to discard this heat elsewhere while it is being changed back to a liquid. To produce refrigeration, all that is necessary is a refrigerant that functions in terms of the physical facts and processes already described. Refrigeration would be adequately achieved if we placed a liquid refrigerant in a box and provided an outlet for its escape following its change to a gas. However, at this point, several practical problems must be solved. To minimize the amount of outside heat that enters the refrigerated storage space, the walls of the box are filled with insulating material which does not absorb heat readily and is a poor heat conductor. A second practical consideration is the cost of the refrigerant. For economy, the refrigerant must be saved, stored, and returned as a liquid to be used again. And this process must be made automatic. This is the purpose behind all the electrical and mechanical devices which we identify with modern refrigerating systems. The compression system operates on mechanical energy produced by a motor-driven compressor. It is divided into the high and low pressure sides. The high pressure side is that portion of the system through which the refrigerant travels under high pressure. This side starts at the discharge valve of the compressor and includes the condenser, the receiver or storage tank, and the liquid line. The low pressure side is that part of the system through which the refrigerant moves under low pressure. This side starts at the expansion valve, which divides the high and low pressure sides, and includes the cooling unit or evaporator, the suction line, and the suction valve of the compressor. The compressor is essentially a cylinder in which a piston works. This is the course of a refrigerant through a typical compression cycle. The refrigerant, in the form of a gas under low pressure, is drawn from the suction line into the compressor. The gas enters the cylinder through the suction valve as the piston moves on its downward stroke. When the piston moves upward, the pressure and temperature of the gas rise. The gas is compressed and is finally pushed through the discharge valve into the condenser. The refrigerant enters the condenser as a high-pressure gas, and its temperature is higher than that of the air or water cooling the condenser. As heat flows from the gas to the cooling agent, the gas condenses, changes to a high-pressure liquid, and passes into the liquid receiver or storage tank. From the receiver, the high-pressure liquid refrigerant passes through the liquid line on its way to the cooling unit. The high-pressure refrigerant must now be reduced to a low-pressure liquid so that it can evaporate at a low temperature. The refrigerant passes through an expansion valve which divides the high and low pressure sides and controls the flow of refrigerant into the cooling unit. The refrigerant enters the cooling unit under a reduced pressure caused by the suction stroke of the compressor. It evaporates, absorbing heat from food in the refrigerator and providing what we know as refrigeration. The refrigerant, now a low-pressure gas, is drawn through the suction line back to the compressor, completing the cycle. This, then, is the cycle of changes of the refrigerant as it moves continuously through the compression system. The principles of refrigeration are physical principles applied as follows for the purpose of removing heat and reducing temperature. First, mechanical refrigeration rests on the ability of a refrigerant to absorb heat while changing from a liquid to a gas and to release that heat while returning to the liquid state. Second, when the pressure on a liquid refrigerant is reduced, the liquid boils at a lower temperature. Third, the transfer of heat from food items or other warm surroundings to a liquid refrigerant involves three processes: radiation, convection, and conduction. With the introduction of a refrigerator box insulated against outside heat, the elements of refrigeration are ready to be brought together in a refrigeration cycle. In the compression cycle, the compressor forces the refrigerant through the system. The liquid refrigerant in the cooling unit absorbs heat, thereby cooling its surroundings and changes to a gas. The gaseous refrigerant loses this heat in the condenser and changes back to a liquid.
Fred Jones went to work. What he came up with was the world's first system for refrigerated transportation. The technology was applied to trucks and trains in the company Jones and Numero would call Thermo King. Fred Jones made it possible to ship and receive perishables year-round. The supermarket was born.
Real cool.
During World War II, Fred adapted the technology for the Army to help bring blood plasma and food to soldiers in the field.
His technology that started off as a simple thing here in Minnesota ended up saving lives. And while there have always been black scientists and black engineers, their stories have not been in the forefront. And so having a Fred Jones, knowing his story, I think that's incredibly inspiring.
Since his death in 1961, Frederick Jones has been recognized as one of America's great inventors and was the first African American to receive the National Medal of Technology. Fred Jones holds more than 50 patents. Fred posthumously received fame, although he never really gained fortune for all of his work at Thermo King. But the fact that his work helped so many, just like his tinkering up in Halleck helped his neighbors, might have made it all right for Fred and his family. His quiet inspiration is another lasting invention.
First, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to work. Second, you have to read. All my life has been study and work. And third, believe in yourself.
If there's one rule to this game, everybody can name it. Be cool.